all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fossone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today John Slemp. John is a 11-year Army veteran, is a professional commercial photographer down in Georgia, but he's got a really cool project, a passion project that everybody, every veteran can relate to. We've all looked at these things and said, man, those are cool. I wish I either had one or could wear one. He's photographing World War II bomber jackets. John, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thank you, Jim, very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I set this up a little bit. I mean, you're not an amateur photographer. You are a commercial photographer, and you do incredible, sort of artsy photos. The rest of us who are so used to just using their iPhone or their camera can hardly appreciate what you can get out of a photograph when you have real equipment and real skilled operators. So I've seen some of your work, John. It's incredible.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's been, it's a combination of having the eye for it and the drive to learn the techniques and how to use the gear and that sort of thing and putting it all together.
Oh, and the lighting and pulling out the colors. So this is World War II Bomber Boys is the website that your work shows up on, and you're producing a book. And I know you're an 11-year Army veteran. You were stationed in Germany. But how did you go from that over to commercial photography and then over to this particular project, which has gone on for a number of years? Tell us about this progression.
Sure. When I was stationed in Germany, I bought a camera in January of 1984. I remember it, and the PX. And I went on a tour of Italy with the chaplains from the 3rd Armored Division in April. I took some leave, and we went down there on a bus tour for a week. And when I got back, I walked over to the photo lab on post, which was, part of the morale support activities, and just sought some feedback from the fellow who ran the lab, who was a German, but he was a professional photographer. And he suggested I submit several of them to the U.S. Army Europe Photo Contest, which I did. And we went on gunnery and maneuver training for 45 days. And when I got back, I had this urgent message to call this lady. And so I did. And literally as soon as I got off the train, and she said, "Can you go to Heidelberg tomorrow night?" I'm like, "Well, what for?" And she said, "For the award ceremony." And I'm like, "What for?" And she said, "You won first place in the people category, color slides. Can you go?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I was off and running. I won a first and a third the next year and another first the following year, along with a bunch of honorable mentions and stuff. And when I got out, I was a pretty serious hobbyist by then. And one of my friends suggested I try it for a living. And so I went to school here in Atlanta to learn about advertising photographer. And then I assisted established photographers for about 5 years, and then went out on my own, basically right after the Olympics here in town. And I was always interested in aviation. I was a generalist for a number of years, and of course, I decided to start specializing in aviation right when the economy tanked in 2007, 2008. Probably the worst time in history to make that decision. But I persevered, and I'm fairly well known in the aviation world now, for my work. And I had always known about these jackets, but I had never seen them. So I put the word out. I belong to the Experimental Aircraft Association. We have a chapter up 18 miles from my house in Lawrenceville. And it turns out it's one of the most active chapters in the country, and a pretty big one, too, over 300 members. And one of the members had their uncle's jacket, so he brought it in, and I photographed it, and it was off to the races from there. It was gorgeous.
Now, John, what year is this again?
This was in 2014.
Okay, so that's when the germ of this idea popped through the soil, and a little shoot, and now you're off. I mean, now you got to continue this.
Oh yeah, well, I just thought it would be fun, and maybe something to put online and talk about lighting, and maybe an exhibition down the road. Nothing that it's turned into was in the back of my mind at that point. And one of my clients is Women in Aviation International, and I had photographed their board. One of the board members is a curator at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. So I sent Dorothy an email with some of those pictures, and 58 minutes later, I literally got a separate email from their curator of the aviation clothing collection, and he said, "We have 15 jackets that'll work for your project. When can you be here?"
I mean, these are just amazing coincidences, right? So the divine hand is on you, moving you in a direction, connecting dots from people to people who know, those people who know, right? You didn't even know the Smithsonian had a bunch of, what'd you call it, aviation?
Of the aviation clothing collection. Yeah, no, definitely. The big ranger in the sky has been smiling over me throughout this whole project, trust me. And, so it went from there. And of course, once I started telling people, well, the Smithsonian let me in the door, all these other museums said, well, you must be somebody, come on in, So.
Well, you are somebody, and you are a skilled photographer, and you've been in a number of museums. Some of them are private museums, local museums. Some of them are national, United States Air Force kind of museums.
Yeah.
But you also have gotten into private collections. Tell us how you, again, because that's Granddad's jacket in the back room that we've been preserving all these years. How do you get introduced to those?
A lot of it was word of mouth, to be honest with you. And that's one thing I want to emphasize too, besides so I photographed 162 jackets, I think at last count, but about 50 of them or so were from privately owned either collections or, family heirlooms. And so a lot of it was word of mouth once it got started.
So as you've gone through this, and I'm sure you've learned more about who made the jackets and how the art got put together. I know you've also interviewed men who had these jackets. But let's start with that. How did these jackets originally come about, and how did they first get turned into works of art?
Well, there was an A1 jacket. The jackets I'm photographing are properly known as A2 summer weight flight. They're leather, but they're fairly lightweight, actually, and they're not good at high altitude. Anyway, back in the 20s, well, it goes back to World War I. We jumped in the war in the middle in 1917, and our Air Force was basically non-existent. So we flew British and French airplanes and a few American planes, that sort of thing. But we didn't have any standardized flight clothing. And so after the war, they started figuring that out. They created the A1, I believe, in 1927. It was standardized, and it had buttons and so on. And then in 1931, I believe, they standardized the A2, and it had zippers, which was a fairly innovative part of a garment at the time. Zippers were not widely used at the time. And so it had zippers and, some other innovations. But, so we had them throughout the 30s in the Army Air Corps. But they were manufactured in the hundreds, because it was the height of the Depression. The Army Air Corps was quite far down on the list of items to be funded. But as World War II approached, the contracts started to be letting for 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, and 50,000 jackets. I think the largest contract I've seen is for 50,000 jackets. And most of them were manufactured in the Northeast because that's where the garment industry was largely located. There was a few in Pennsylvania, there was a few around Chicago and that sort of thing, but there were 18 different manufacturers from what I can tell. And at the time, the military procured all the items that made up the jacket. They procured the leather, the wool for the cuffs and the waistband, the liners, all the snaps and buttons and so on, the zippers, all, and they gave it to the manufacturers and said, build us a jacket. This is the diagram. This is what we want. And it cost about $8.25 to build a jacket. Yeah.
Prices have changed, right?
Prices have definitely changed. And one jacket that was brought to me last summer from California by a friend, I photographed up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is where the big air show is every year, the largest air show in the country. It's called Air Venture. She brought it to me, and I photographed it in a garage in a house we were staying in, and she had it appraised right before she brought it. And the appraiser in California said, yeah, this is worth $8,000.
Holy cow. Yeah, these, again, are really incredible pieces of history. As you've done this work, have you been able to kind of zoom into when and who decided, I'm going to start putting artwork on my A2 jacket?
Well, veterans have always been kind of innovative in that regard, shall we say. I was an armor officer by trade, and the guys always wanted to put a name on their tank, and we got to that, on the muzzle, the bore evacuator on the muzzle, on the main gun and that sort of thing. And, I'm not really sure who did it first, to be honest with you, but it's a one-piece back on the jacket. It doesn't have any seams, and so it was an ideal canvas. And somebody's like, hey, let's paint, our airplane name on there or something like that, and it just took off from there. And not to coin a bad phrase, but and technically it was against regulations. You're not supposed to deface.
We all did those things against regulations, but because it's a little. It's a little bit of John. It's a little bit of folk art. It's sometimes that kind of stuff's called trench art.
Exactly. Yeah. But, and so it started, and it turned into its own art form. And the commanders essentially turned a blind eye to it, especially in World War II, because the attrition rate was so high, especially in the 8th Air Force. When they started bombing in the summer of 42, it wasn't too bad. The first mission, all 12 planes came back and that sort of thing. And then as it went into late 42 and 43 and the Luftwaffe got involved and the flak became heavy and so on, the 8th Air Force was suffering 60-70% casualty rate.
Yeah, clearly some of this is related to morale, right? To let the guys do what they need to do to have positive morale. Did you find, are these the ones that you're able to find today and photograph, are they primarily out of the European theater, or was
actually, I made a conscious decision once the book started to be an idea, and to break it up by theater. So I've got European theater, primarily 8th Air Force out of England. And then I've got the Italy and North Africa as a separate theater, or combined theaters, as far as the artwork goes. And then I've got the China, Burma, India, and the Pacific all in one bunch. So they were all over the world, but, I'd say probably the most elaborate artwork was done out of England in the 8th Air Force.
Well, we often talk in Veterans Radio about preserving the history and the stories of our American veterans, and John Slemp, who's taken these amazing photographs, is preserving that history of really the flight jacket art. John, but you have a kind of a team, and I wanted to talk a little bit about this because you have somebody who's involved with the project who's a fashion and cultural historian. You have somebody who's a design illustrator and artist. Talk a little bit about your team, because it's more than just a great photograph.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely wanted to do more than just a pretty picture coffee table book, And having seen the other books that have been done on the subject 20, 25 years ago, A, they were not professionally photographed, and B, they didn't really talk much about the guys. They said here's, Sergeant Snuffy in XYZ bomb unit. But it doesn't say, where he's from, what he did after the war, none of that kind of information. And I just thought it was a missed opportunity, to be honest with you, because once I started, as someone said, well, I forget, it might have been my idea, I can't remember now, but once I started documenting this artwork, these jackets are essentially walking billboards, and it talks about the guy's service, but
they're really the whole point of these jackets were to be individualized. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
So it really is his story. Maybe it's the number of kills, maybe it's the number of planes, maybe it's where he came from, maybe it's his girlfriend, but that's really a good part of it too, isn't it, John? It's their personal story.
Absolutely, yeah. And I thought, the artwork was an appropriate way to tell their story. And so that's when I started concentrating on gathering the stories as much as I could. I photographed over 25 veterans, did portraits, 16 WASPs and 16 original Rosies, which are not in the book, but, the WASPs are mentioned in the book. I've got several Tuskegee Airmen. I photographed 6 of them because I think they're important to be included in there too. And, the stories are just incredible. Some of them are well known, like Zemer and so on, who was awarded the Medal of Honor, but some are virtually unknown. Probably most of them are virtually unknown. They're from family recollections and so on, and personal memoirs.
So as you sort of tell these stories, and I've listened to some of the audio stories you have with them, and I look forward to seeing some of the photographs of them. When is the book going to be available so that we can buy it for our dads and our grandpas, and it's going to be a great Christmas kind of gift or a Father's Day gift? What are you shooting for here on publication?
Right. Well, today's the 21st of September, 2022, and I sent the final edit to the designer today. So it'll probably take him a week or so to tweak it, and then it's going to the printer. We're printing it here in the States. I thought that was important, in Houston, and so it won't be stuck on a boat and that sort of thing. And it's going to cost more, but at this point, I didn't really care. It's such an American topic that I thought it important that it be printed here in the States.
Oh, absolutely. Good job on that. I can tell everybody out there who's listening to John, right after we get done with this interview, he's going to go open up some adult beverages, because there's nothing better than sending it off and saying, I'm done with this project.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming to more than but and we're instead of calling it self-publishing, we're calling it privately published. That's a term my designer coined, and going back to the team. So yeah, I thought at some point the idea that these jackets influence fashion design worldwide popped into my head, and I'm like, well, why don't we talk to a fashion historian and find out? And lo and behold, I finally found one, a young lady in New York City, Laura McClaws-Helms, who's just a few hours shy of a doctorate in the subject. And she wrote a wonderful chapter for me. It was 22 pages when she sent it to me. And she said, I think I found enough information to do my own book on the subject.
It really is. I mean, even today, it's a classic design, right? We're seeing a takeoff of that design in the movies. It's a very popular kind of jacket that I think everybody recognizes as soon as they see it, which is kind of an American iconic classic jacket. So, I mean, this is really interesting stuff, I think, for folks. One of the things John mentioned is that he and I bumped into each other because one of the jackets he's doing Jay Zemmers, which is in the book, is also, there's a story of him on the homeofheroes.com website that we curate. And John asked if he could use some of that story in telling Zemmer's story. And, of course, we said, yeah, but more importantly, I want to hear about the book you're doing. John, as the book gets published sometime in mid-November, how are folks going to be able to find it and order it?
So, I thought about doing bomberboys.com, but I didn't want the FBI showing up, so I decided to put I in front of that. So it's it's www.WWII for World War II bomberboys.com. And at some point we'll have it on Amazon. We are already taking pre-orders. We've already had 150 pre-ordered. And it'll be available in bookstores and major, probably aviation museums, to start with. And, so those will be the primary ways to obtain the book.
Do you have a target price on it yet?
Yes, $129.95. And that may sound expensive, but it's actually 12 inches by 12 inches, and it's almost 400 pages.
Well, and, as I say, it's artwork. It's really something.
It is. And, it has an index, too. None of the other books on the subject have an index. I had that professionally done just recently, and I've already used it myself, to be honest with you.
Well, if you got 400 pages, you need a little help finding that story that you want to tell your friend about.
Exactly, and I think it'll be a research tool as well. I actually did a spreadsheet, which will be available on the website at some point, but it's got the manufacturer, the date, the contract number, the number in the contract, the jacket itself, who owned it, et cetera, et cetera. So I've got a spreadsheet on all that. So I've tried to do more than just create a pretty photo book. We've got a section in there on conservation as well, written by a professional conservator. And we were able to, I put the word out through Facebook. Does anybody know, an expert on collecting these jackets? And a lot of people said, talk to Jeff Schrader. And I'm like, okay, who's Jeff Schrader? Jeff Schrader is an appraiser for Antiques Roadshow. Oh. And he wrote a section for me on collecting the jackets. And it's 4 or 5 pages, but it's very well done. And he's a great writer, tons of experience. He's got his own company that buys and sells militaria. And, and there's some lovely illustrations in there by a fellow named John Mollison, who lives in North Dakota, I believe. And he is heavily involved with, the Distinguished Flying Cross Society. I believe that's the name of it. But he's been an illustrator for a long time, and he contributed 9 illustrations of these aircraft, because I'm sure, there's a lot of kids now that have no idea what a B-17 looks like.
Oh, absolutely. No, this is educational and will cause people to ask questions and be able to tell stories to the younger generation and to that's so important, which is why we tell these veteran stories. Right. So
and we've done a few video interviews and several audio interviews as well. So we're going to put that together as well on the website.
Well, we want to encourage people to reach out to John, pre-order the book. We want to encourage them that, hey, maybe I got a jacket I don't know what to do with. I suspect John's got a lot of connections in that regards at this point in time. So, John, as we close out here, let's give everybody the website one more time.
Sure. It's www.WWII, stands for World War II, bomberboys.com.
Well, we really appreciate you taking some time to talk to Veterans Radio today. It's a great project. You're doing great work preserving this history, and it's really something that's only somebody with the artistic eye that you have as a photographer could really bring this to life. So you're doing a great job on this, John.
Many, many thanks for your kind comments. I really appreciate it.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Faussone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. We appreciate all your support. You can go to veteransradio.net, click on the sponsor level, and continue to support keeping Veterans Radio on the air. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.